Hey guys, welcome to Alvarez TV. Today we're blasting through the myths and effects of humidity and how to protect your guitar in any climate.
Gentle.
Nice, I like that. Hi guys.
Hello everyone.
Hi guys,
How you
welcome
doing?
back to Alvarez TV. Hope you're doing well. Tim, you back from your travels?
Back.
Yeah, how was it?
Great, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, really good.
Been around the country?
Been very much around the country.
Big old tour. How many dates you do?
Hundreds, can't remember.
A lot, right?
Hundreds?
You do
Yeah.
like matinees and all sorts, right?
In the hundreds, yeah.
Very nice,
Bloody
mate.
hell, great.
I've been to Israel,
Yeah,
the Holy
30
Land.
nights straight.
I played this.
Did you take that?
I took this
To the desert?
to the desert,
Did it
which
behave?
is an interesting segue.
Oh, dude, Davey.
Today we're discussing all about humidity and its effects on guitars.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting subject. Quite a weighty subject, I think.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think because it's been discussed many times, I think a lot of people who tune in will know a lot about it, or certainly enough. We just want to try and get a little bit further to explain actually why some things happen and some very clear steps, especially in our homes. I think we know about climates and dry and warm and moisture and all that sort of stuff, or many people do. We'll get to the basics anyway, and then we'll just push it a bit further because I think there's some things that people don't mention, which we should. We might even do a little experiment or something.
Science.
Get a little bit scientific.
Science experiments.
Is that all right,
Interesting.
Tim?
I'm looking forward to the science experiment. 'Cause I don't,
Mr. Academic.
I don't know what it's. I can't even figure out what it's going to be. So I'm quite interested to find out what it will be.
I did see something. It was a scientist explain it, and I think it was a great way to kind of say. For me, it was just like the penny dropped. Of course, that's what we'll try and get across. But first of all, I think we all, hopefully, are fairly aware. Although we're fairly aware what humidity can do to guitars, and they, especially low humidity, can really damage your guitar, sometimes beyond repair. Most guitar manufacturers do not cover that in their warranty, and rightfully so, because you can't do anything in manufacturing to stop it. You can do things to slow it down and to help protect your guitar, and we'll get into aging and torrefaction and drying and stuff. But basically, a guitar, is a very porous, open, elastic material.
Because essentially, it's you sort of chop down the tree, but the wood itself is still.
So trees are designed, they're an ecosystem in themselves, and they're designed for water and fluids to travel around. Nutrients, hydration, whatever.
Absolutely.
Okay. So when you cut that out, you cut it down, you make it into a guitar. Obviously on a cellular level, so the cells that make up the wood are still there, right? And they still behave somewhat okay. It's not an active ecosystem like a tree, but those cells can still take on and release moisture. Acoustic guitar building is so subtle. You're dealing with a top which is 2 to 3 millimeters, and all that tension. And we have to build curvatures and radiuses in our tops for strength. That once you start messing with that kind of mix, the guitar can be affected very quickly. When the winter comes, I think all guitar companies know that the phone's going to be ringing and people are going to say, they usually say, guitar's got a problem with the neck. The neck's warped or the neck's bent or whatever. So in my experience, like, or 99.9% of the time, it's never the neck. You know, if you're drying a piece of solid mahogany correctly, it's the most stable wood out there, and very rarely should it warp, unless you're doing something wrong and you're using very green wood or something. But people say the neck's warped because the geometry has changed. In cold weather, in contraction, when the cells contract, the first thing that goes, usually, is we build an arch. All the tops are radiused. The bracing, by the bracing, because the bracing is radiused. That radius gives us a bit of strength. It allows us to get the geometry right, action, playability, etc. When the cells contract, this top will contract and you lose the arch. So in the arch there, you know, you'll see it. That flattens out. So once that flattens out, your strings start lying on the frets. You sight the neck, and all of a sudden, the neck's high because the top has dropped. So when you sight the neck, you look at the end of the fingerboard hitting the top of the bridge, and all of a sudden it's like, it looks like that because the bridge has dropped.
Okay.
So it's not the neck. Yes, the geometry is out and the neck is not aligned anymore because it's the top has moved, not that the neck has moved.
Got you.
Got it? Conversely, if the top takes on lots of moisture, it can belly up, get a bit fat. That means your action is going to get high. So the first things to look for.
Yes, of course, makes perfect sense.
So it's geometry, right?
Yeah.
It's shifting the geometry so the action, you know, the initial thing. So let's talk about contraction first. Cold, dry weather. If you're not looking after your guitar, the cells of the wood will lose moisture, and therefore, on a cellular level, they get smaller, they contract, and the wood shrinks. The first thing that goes is usually the curvature in the top, so the bridge will sink. The neck angle becomes high, you get fret buzzing. So if you're in the winter months especially and your guitar starts buzzing, you probably need to react pretty quickly if it wasn't. Or you get sharp fret ends. And even though we use hard woods,
because the frets sort of become exposed.
Correct.
Right.
So even like ebony and rosewood, they can contract really quick. So once they start contracting, you expose the ends of the frets. Yeah. So if you start getting sharp frets or fretting out, buzzing in your fingerboard, it's humidity, and react quick, and we'll get into how to humidify.
How quick is quick? So you said things can contract quickly. How quick is quick? A week, a day?
I think it can go in hours. And sometimes guitars can even be shocked, and you can get sort of lacquer checking. You know, if a guitar's been stored in a certain condition and it's opened in another condition, it just shocks, you know, and you can crack the lacquer. Obviously in contraction, the further it goes, it keeps getting smaller. You usually get splits, you know, around here, down by the bridge, and the top cracks. You get splits in there. And of course, you're now into a very expensive repair when you could have looked after it by a small investment into a humidifier in your home, or we recommend D'Addario humidity packs because they're two-way, so like a gel.
Yeah, they are great.
You know,
and you put those just in your guitar case,
Put them in your guitar case for storage. Humidity packs are great because they will release moisture and they'll take it. You know, what can we do as guitar makers? So first of all, as guitar owners, guitar likes to live in the environment that the wood is stable and relaxed, and usually it's the environment which guitar makers make the wood, which is a very temperate, moderate temperature and humidity. So anything from 19, 20 degrees to 24, 25 degrees centigrade, I think that's in the 60s, 66 to 70 something Fahrenheit. And then humidity, you know, we aim, in our production, we aim around about 45%. It can go to 50, maybe a little bit below. It can go down to 40. Once you're getting beyond 40 and 50%, you're in the realms of, depending on how seasoned your guitar is or how old it is, we'll get into that, there could be a little bit of movement. You start getting sub 30% humidity or 25, you're starting to really push the guitar's limits to hold on to its current state. The best thing to do, in my experience, is the room that you store your guitars, buy a small humidifier and especially in the winter if you're living in a cold air area, and humidify the room and try and keep it, between 40 and 50% relative humidity. Hygrometers, etc., will measure in relative humidity.
Because there's two types of humidity. I was reading about this. You've got absolute humidity and relative humidity. And relative is depending on how hot and cold the temperature is.
Correct.
Is that right?
So if you were to walk outside and get some sort of carton and you parcel a piece of air from the outside, and that's it, there's some air in this parcel, and you measure the humidity there, that's the absolute humidity. Relative humidity is what the humidity is or could become in relation to its temperature. So therefore, if you take that piece of absolute humidity or that air that you've just captured outside and something makes it get warmer or colder, then that's the relative humidity you would measure within that parcel of air. So the absolute is changed in a percentage.
So the problem that we have, especially going into this time of the year, is that we're heating up the cold air. Well,
we'll show that later.
Right.
Because I think with our little experiment, we're going to show that really clearly.
Nice.
But I think guitar makers, what they're doing is, so first of all, you might see something in our literature, and many other people do this or use vacuum kilns, something called torrefaction, which lots of you will know about torrefaction. And we torrefy every single, in our Alvarez line, we torrefy every single solid top, right from an AD30 right up to Masterworks Elite. And we do that as a way to try and get as much volatile saps, sugars, moisture out the top, change that and align it to something that is similar to the top being older. And what I mean by that is, in the guitar's first 2 or 3 years is probably likely your guitar will move the most then. It's brand new. It goes usually to another climate or another environment from the factory or whatever. What we do is we spend about 8 months seasoning wood with traditional kilns, back to settle in controlled environments, back to the kilns, back to settle again, and a mix between resting and cooking. Before the tops go into production, we put them in a vacuum sealed kiln and we cook it to about 100 to 105 degrees centigrade. Say somebody like the other people, say Martin do a VTS, which is a vintage tone system, I think it's called. What they're doing is they're cooking their tops very much higher than that. I think probably about 200 degrees C, maybe more. And they're trying to achieve a vintage sound. And that vintage sound is because the top is older, and what happens is over time, the moisture within the cells, it oxidizes, excuse me, and mineralizes. So that means that vapor eventually is, it gases off, and the lignins inside the cells will mineralize and they'll get hard. So it becomes almost like not a solid, but a very much stable structure. So it's not a bunch of sort of moist cells anymore. It's become much more dry and more solid structure within the cells as that mineralization takes place. When you take the oxygen, sorry if this is getting a bit technical, when you take the oxygen out of an oven, you can cook the wood to a higher temperature without setting on fire,
of course, yeah.
Right? And what we're doing is we're trying to advance that oxidization and mineralization of all of that moisture within the cells. So we're trying to trick the wood that instead of going into the world being a couple of months old or a couple of months as a guitar, it's actually been in its current form for 2-3 years or whatever it might be. And those other makers that use torrefaction to create vintage style instruments, they're cooking to a higher degree to make it even more dry to sound like a vintage instrument. And it's very, very interesting because you literally take 2 tops. You take a top out of the oven. And we only cook to about 105. We're looking for stability rather than vintage tone, but it does affect the sound. That's why we call it ATR, Advanced Tonal Response. You got 2 tops, identical tops. One's been in the oven, one's happened. This one hasn't. This one is much, much lighter in weight. Even one single top, it's amazing how much light weight it is compared to this one because...
All the water's gone.
Yeah, the moisture's come out. Some things have started, that process of mineralization or oxidization of the volatiles is what they call them, has started happening.
How long is the process generally?
We only do that. These kilns are super efficient. So usually we're cooking for about 48 hours.
Oh.
And then they come out and sit and rest in and then they get processed.
And
That's after months of processing. So it's the final stage.
right, okay.
Is it consistent? So is it this, did you get the same lignins? What that means is, do you get the same gassing out and becoming solid in each piece of wood, or is every bit of wood different?
It would be different. I don't know if that's measurable. So inside the kiln's like a big round thing with one of those doors on. Looks like a big, it's 30 feet long. It's like a big submarine.
Yeah.
And you seal it. It's got a computer on the side, and you set it, and it cooks. But all the tops are, they're like sticked, so that the air can flow around them completely. There's a gap between every single top, so they're getting very, very treated very evenly in there. Torrefaction, goes back to the Vikings with doing it for their ships, to make the ships more water resistant and lighter. They were taking that moisture out and they were cooking underground. They were building fires and baking wood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it kind of comes from.
So in terms of, because essentially it's kind of simulating what would normally happen if you left the wood to season.
Correct.
Right. I.e. the Yairis are naturally kind of...
Correct. So we don't do that with Yairi.
Yeah.
Because Yairi wood sits there for years. That process happens. And that's really what you want to do.
Yeah.
But who's got 5 years or whatever, or 50 years?
Yeah, in the case of the
Honduran to let wood, that's very rare. And there's not a lot of large vintage or certainly years seasoned wood piles left in the world. There's just not, I know of a handful. There's more obviously, but in our industry, tone wood. So it's we accelerate the process, and we're tricking the wood basically.
And that 48 hours, is it kind of simulating what, like a 5-year or 10-year process? Or
I honestly don't know, but I would say certainly we're trying to get past that first couple of years where a guitar will move the most, probably in its first winter.
To try and get it to that stable state.
Well, a few years ago when we started this, like every winter, the phone would ring. There would be winter issues. The first year we did this, I rang Jerry at the show. I said, Jerry, how's it going? It's very strange. Phone hasn't rang. Dealers or consumers or whatever. And when we started using the vacuum kiln, when we started torrefying everything, it just is magic. Absolute magic. Best thing we ever did. And what it does, the reason why we gave it a name, ATR, Advanced Tonal Response, as part of our torrefaction, is because the wood is quicker, because it's lighter. And what the immediate musical effect that I heard was the separation. When you're playing the guitar, you could just hear all the strings much more clearer, because it's not, moisture is going to muddy the sound, right?
Well, yeah, you're getting rid of that, because I know it sounds ridiculous when you say it, but I can hear when this is damp, like when it's took on too much water, because it sounds fat in an unpleasant way. Great.
So we talk about contraction. So if we go the other way, right, and say, you're in a very humid, let's say a tropical, subtropical climate.
Yeah.
The guitar is going to take on moisture. It's going to get fat. First of all, it's going to make the action high, because now the bridge is going to come up, raise the string height, and it's going to be difficult to play. But exactly what you said, one of the first signs of a wet guitar is it becomes dead.
Yeah.
It sounds bad because it's taking on that moisture. It's just deadening the sound. The response becomes much weaker and slower.
Yeah, like you've got a sponge in your ear.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to think about it. Because it's very easy to buy a hygrometer. Hygrometer.
Yeah.
And to do these things, but you can also, if you know your guitar and you know it inside out, or you're very used to it, you can start by just what you hear.
Yeah.
You don't have to buy things straight away. If you start hearing things, then you can also go that way.
Best thing to do, buy a hygrometer in the house, especially where your guitars are. And it's actually interesting because the relation to you might think it's a cold day, but it's really humid, or it's a hot day and it's not dry. It all depends. That would need a conversation around climate and how that all works. But it's not always what meets the eye, especially in temperate places. And you don't have to live, next to the sea or a rainforest to be somewhere where it's very humid. Like in St. Louis, where we are in the States. It's central. It's not next to the coast, but in the summer it's really, really humid. You get all of that humid air from the Gulf of Mexico, and it's like, and then in the winter you get all the cold air from Canada, and it's dry as. Buy a hygrometer, just get one of those little, usually we all have guitars, most of us in the bedrooms, little humidifier, or dehumidifier if you're living
somewhere more extreme.
Yeah, and that's it. It's a small investment if you want to look after your instrument.
Good advice.
Yeah, or the humidity packs.
Humidity packs.
I swear by those instead. They're much easier to go.
But so like in your case, do you keep them in your case?
Yeah, I've got in the guitar case for this is just behind the cameras, and I've got 4 in there.
Yeah.
I put the double one inside as you're meant to, one on either side of the boat here.
Airbags.
Yeah, airbags. Just keeps it because I've noticed some guitars are more sensitive than others to this, in my opinion. I might be talking rubbish, but I feel this way. I feel this guitar is particularly sensitive to change, and as a result, I do keep this one full of humidity packs, and that makes it sound the best and play the best. Great. And also intonate the best because I can hear when it's out. Yeah.
Do you keep your guitars in the cases?
I do now. Like I prefer not to. Over time, I've just learned like the 10-15 seconds it takes for me to pull it out of the rack and get it out of the case is worth the consistency and the lack of, because when this one does go dull, if there's even, if my house hits 65%, 67% max and it goes dull and I can hear it and I don't like that, so I put it in its case and then that just gets rid of all those issues. And
high-end guitars, which you're using, it's even more crucial because laminated sides and backs or tops are more stable. They've got glue in there, they're laminated, it's stronger, it's more stable, so if you're using all solid instruments. But basically, never leave your guitar in a car. Never leave it outside. Buy a hygrometer, buy a little humidifier, usually that's what we need. Dehumidifier, if you need that. And just keep an eye on the humidity. You're investing in a great piece of wood here, music wood, and look after it.
And a little note though, not to be feeling too paranoid about it.
Correct.
Because I've just taken this particular guitar on quite a journey.
Correct.
On a number of aeroplanes.
Yeah.
In a very, very hot place in the desert with 25% humidity. And I haven't had this thing set up, after I got back. And I've stuck some strings on and it is intonated perfectly and it's
totally
great.
Fine. So guitars, if done properly, are resilient.
Yeah.
But just keep an eye on the humidity. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys. See ya.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button and consider subscribing to our channel. If you want to watch more videos like this one, click the video on the screen now.